You're listening to Bible Truth Feed, a podcast by christadelphianvideo.org for Christadelphians and all those seeking the truth about the Bible message. Join us now as we present our latest episode.
Right, welcome to Family Matters. Today we have some special guests from all the way from the UK. It's night time for them and it's early morning for us as we record this. So we've got Dan and Gina Woodcock with us this evening or this morning, whatever time of day it is. And Dan and Gina are going to be talking to us about depression. Now, Dan's been through depression for a period of around about 8 years, but he'll explain that later. And so he and Gina have some really solid first-hand experience of what it's like experiencing depression and living with someone with depression, and what we can do, what we can all do, and how we can all respond to that for each of them. So we're looking forward to that this morning. So welcome, Dan and Gina. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Oh, no.
So welcome, Dan and Gina. What I want to do, just to start with, is to do a Bible reading. Just a quick one from Psalm 102. Now, this is Dan's written a series of articles in the Christadelphian magazine, which is how I tracked them down. And one of the places he quoted was Psalm 102. So I'll just read the first 11 verses. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I am in distress. Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly. For my days vanish like smoke. My bones burn like glowing embers. My heart is blighted and withered like grass. I forget to eat my food. Because of my loud groaning, I am reduced to skin and bones. I am like a desert owl, like an owl among the ruins. I lie awake. I have become like a bird alone on a roof. All day long, my enemies taunt me. Those who rail against me use my name as a curse, for I eat ashes as my food and mingle my drink with tears because of your great wrath. For you have taken me up and thrown me aside. My days are like the evening shadow. I wither away like grass. So, I know in your article, Dan, that's a bit how you described how you were feeling. So can you tell us your story about depression?
I don't even know where to start, to be honest. But, I don't think I've read that psalm since I read it to put into that article, and it's just reading over it again is it just so exactly matches the symptoms of depression. It's unreal. As far as I go, I probably suffered from depression for as long as I can remember. Never really badly until I was in my 20s. But I suffered with it mildly throughout my teens. Not that it more manifested itself in low self-esteem and things like that in my teens. But once I got into my 20s, it got steadily worse. Then when I was out of work for a while, and that just made it even worse. And I think I fell into a couple of the likely causes or likely groups to get depression. So, because both my mum and dad suffer with depression, and as I said, low self-esteem is another indicator. So it was sort of mild up until my mid-20s. Then I was out of work, and I dealt with it really badly. The fact that I was out of work and depressed, so I was just basically sat at home with my own thoughts. I started drinking really heavily. I ended up completely emotionally numb, and I did so many stupid things and made so many terrible choices which I won't go into tonight. But it was basically searching for some way to feel something, because the depression left me feeling like a zombie, like I didn't really know if I was human or not, or what I was, because there was just no emotion or anything. I couldn't work. So I was looking for something to feel, whether it didn't matter if it was guilt or sadness or upset. Feeling something would be better than just feeling nothing. And this lasted. Sorry?
Were you married at the time?
Yes, yeah. This was just after we'd got married that I was going to say just after we got married that things started to go downhill, but that's not quite what I meant.
Oh dear. We'll talk about that another time. Tune in.
No, it was just after, well, about 6 or 8 months after we got married that I lost my job, and that was when things really started to go badly.
It kind of just spiraled from there, really, didn't it? And got worse.
And basically things stayed like that for about 6, 8 years, something like that. And I eventually began to come out of it slowly, but it was incredibly slow progress. And it's only been the last 2 or 3 years really that I've started to feel like myself and be able to really do things.
And to have kind of more ups than downs, isn't it?
Yeah.
The balance started to change to more ups and less downs, but that's only in the last couple of years, really. So.
Oh, wow. So how long did that go on? I said 8 years originally, but was that?
Yeah, I think that we just can't count when we said 8 years to start with. We did say 8 years to you, but actually 8 to 14 is only 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that was just the really bad time, and I mean it was still bad after that, but there was a slight turning point there, and things started to look a bit better.
And it's kind of difficult to put a definite number on, isn't it? Because it's,
you
know, when you started to feel better, it was such tiny steps in the right direction that you can't really say this is when it got better.
Yeah.
It kind of was such a gradual process.
And some of the steps.
Still having your ups and downs as well, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because even within that really bad time, there were certain times when you could still go out and you could still do some of the things you used to do.
Yeah.
And now things are much better. There are still some days where you find things difficult again. So I think it's all about the ups and downs.
Yeah, and I've learned to manage it a lot better as well, and to know my own brain, if you like. And I know when it's starting to come on, I can feel it, and I know the sort of things that I need to do.
So describe for us what depression is and what it isn't, and what that looks like for you, Dan.
What an excellent question. Well, what depression isn't is just feeling a little bit sad. Everybody has days when they feel down or they feel miserable, even if it's really, really miserable. For most people, it tends to just be like a day, 2 or 3 days here and there. It's also not grief. Grief is a completely natural emotion. It's the way we deal with loss and things associated with that. But grief can lead to depression if it carries on too much, if it carries on too long. But usually with grief, you get happy memories associated. With whatever you're feeling sad about, you've got happy things to look back on, whereas that's not the case with depression. Everything is just black. It's also not a lack of faith. There's just, it causes a lack of faith, but it isn't a lack of faith, or it can cause a lack of faith. It did for me. Basically, it's a mental illness. And if you break your leg or something, then your brain is the thing that helps you to say, right, give it 6 weeks in plaster or whatever, you'll be up and walking about again. Whereas if it's your brain that's got the problem, then there's nothing to tell you. how long, that you can't put a time frame on it. You can't say these are the logical steps because your brain is like all over the place. And so that's part of what makes depression so bad, because you just can't see an end to it, because your brain can't process what's going on.
I mean, with the medical definition, it's to do with being 2 weeks or more, isn't it, of feeling that low. So it's that sustained feeling rather than it being ups and downs.
Yeah. So yeah, a real blackness.
It's incredibly difficult to describe. I'll tell you through some of the symptoms that I had, because it's just difficult to sum up. Feeling down, sad or depressed, yeah, we've been through that one. Feeling isolated and alone, and it's such a weird feeling, because there is half of you that just wants to say, just leave me alone, I just want to be on my own, just don't come near me, I just want to curl up and be on my own. But then there's another half of you that is desperate just to be loved and just make everything better for me, please. And it's so conflicting. It's just such conflict. And like you'll go to one thing, you'll go and lie down in bed and curl up and cry or whatever. And at that point, all you want is someone to come and give you a hug and just tell you everything's going to be all right. But then as soon as they do that, you're like, no, I don't want to be near you. Go away. It's just such an odd feeling. There's a loss of interest in anything that you really enjoyed doing. Like I used to be really heavily into football, but I just lost interest in it completely. I didn't want to watch it, I didn't want to play it, didn't really care what was going on, and it was just so unlike me. It just wasn't me at all. I just had no interest in doing anything and no energy to do anything. There's under or overeating, which is like quite a broad thing, but people deal with it in different ways. Some people don't eat at all. Some people eat loads. I mean, the last time I had a really bad bout of depression, I was eating maybe 3 slices of bread a day. We used to have the thick chunky bread, and I'd just cut myself a slice of that, put some butter on it, and just eat that, because that's all I could bring myself to eat. And even that, it's just like eating things is like eating cardboard, or like the psalm says, your food is turned to ashes. It's just like that, because normally I love food, but there's just no taste in it, and it's just like chewing for the sake of it. You eat because you know you have to eat something, but really just
becomes a job.
Yeah, exactly that. Trouble sleeping, or sleeping all the time. Weirdly, I had both of those at the same time.
Interesting.
I would sleep all day, or sleep half of the day, but when I tried to go to sleep at night, I would go to sleep all right, but I would just wake up with my heart pounding, with anxiety, my stomach in knots, and there's just no explanation for it, and it makes you feel so terrible. You've got all this adrenaline as soon as you wake up, just suddenly coursing through your body, and it's terrifying, really. You wake up shaking and head pounding, heart pounding.
And it just made you so tired, didn't it? Because you try and catch up the sleep in the day, but then you couldn't sleep at night, and it just went round in a cycle. And then, I mean, you were just so tired. I mean, even, you know, he'd been maybe get up for a couple of hours and just have to go back to bed because you were just so exhausted.
Part of that, though, is
how much do you think the lack of sleep contributed to the depression being there, or the bad cycles?
It's difficult to say now, because obviously it was caused in the first place by the depression.
Right.
But I know now that if I get too overtired, then it does start to come back.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it was a contributor.
Yeah, I mean, when our daughter was born 10 months ago, she just didn't sleep at all, and that caused you to feel really low, didn't it? Because you were missing so much sleep. So
part of it is just that depression is such an energy sapping disease anyway, because sometimes I would get up on a good day and be like, yeah, I'm ready to go, and be up by about 10 o'clock. In the morning, I'd be absolutely exhausted. Because you're fighting every single thought that comes into your head. Like every single slight thought, you have to push back, and it takes so much effort to push back every thought. Like, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. And that's not right. Every single time, and it's absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
What else have we got? Feeling worthless, low self-esteem, increased sensitivity to guilt is another thing. I would only have to do the slightest thing wrong, and I would feel such terrible, crushing guilt that I just felt like I couldn't live with myself. I would just curl up on the floor and just sob. Basically, I'd just say, I just cannot stand being me anymore. I don't want to be me anymore.
And you couldn't be convinced otherwise. There was nothing that I could say to convince him that, you know, this is the depression that's making you feel like this. You know, you haven't done anything wrong. You've got nothing to feel guilty for. I could say all of that, and it made absolutely no difference, because in your mind, it was all true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one of the rarer ones, I think, unless you have depression really severely, is the psychotic symptoms, or like delusions, hallucinations, which I've only really suffered with once, which was last time I had a really bad bout of depression. I kept seeing, flashing across my phone, military is watching, and it just wouldn't go away. And it's just like this utter paranoia that I built up in my head, and I don't even know where it came from. But I've never had anything like that before or since, thankfully. But I kept just having to show Gina my phone and say, are you seeing this? Is this even real? It's so scary. It's hard to overstate what kind of an impact depression can have on your mind, and it can make you see and hear things that aren't there, which is never something that I really associated with depression at all.
No, it's the new one to me too. It's really.
Yeah, it's I'd heard about it, but never sort of believed that it would actually happen. But obviously it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Gina, you were married to Dan right through most of this, the worst of it. How did you cope? What did you experience?
Well, I mean, I knew. I've known Dan since we were 12 or 13. So I knew as a teenager that he did suffer with depression, although it was only mild. And then when we were going out, again, I knew that he had some bad days, but I never really saw maybe the full extent of it, or I suppose it wasn't as bad then. So it was only really, as Dan said, about 6 months or so after we got married that he really plunged into this really deep depression. And I knew nothing about depression. It wasn't something I've really had any experience with. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know how serious it was. And so to start with, I kind of just tried to ignore it and hoped it would go away, and hoped he would just start to feel better and that would be it. I soon realized that wasn't the case, and actually this was something long term. This was something that, we both needed to work through together. It was hard because I didn't really know how to deal with it. I found it hard to talk to people about, and I also felt it wasn't really my thing to talk about. I didn't want to talk to other people about how hard things were or how Dan was feeling. I felt that was almost disloyal, because it was his thing, not mine. But I think not talking about it made it harder for me, and perhaps I should have done that, and that would have made it a bit easier. I think I felt pushed out. We'd only just got married, and suddenly there was like this divide between us already. We didn't really talk to each other, and I didn't know how to help. He didn't want me to help. It wasn't the start to married life that I was expecting. I think I felt like I must have done something wrong as well, because it started so soon after we got married, this particularly bad bout. I thought it must somehow be my fault, or that other people would think it was my fault as well. And so it took a long time to work through, you know, really small steps, and then we got there in the end.
So what did you do to help to keep your marriage together? I mean, even 6 years of that divide and, you know, walls, and it's really tough.
Yeah,
I mean, I know what 5 minutes is like.
I think because it was so early on in our marriage as well, we hadn't really had that time to build a really strong foundation of marriage to begin with. So I think if we'd had time before it hit, it maybe would have been different. But because it was so early on, we hadn't really had that time together to build our marriage. And I think it did really test our marriage. It was really hard, because I was ready to be settled down, to, you know, to be in the wife role, and I think, you know, you just felt.
I was just incredibly immature, to be honest. I still wanted to be a young lad going to the pub with my mates and do what I want to do, and that all contributed even further to my depression, because I felt guilty for wanting to feel like that, for feeling like that, and guilty for doing things like that, which then just made my depression worse, and made things worse for both of us.
Did you feel trapped as well? Like, because you're married now, you couldn't?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, definitely. I think part of me had always seen moving out and getting married as like being free, but then, like, I came to a realization that Gina was like,
careful.
I was gonna say locking me in the house, but then I thought no one's gonna get that joke, so I won't say it. But no, I've said it anyway. But no, but obviously it's not. You're making a new commitment to somebody else.
I think suffering the depression so early on meant you never really got almost to begin that role, did you? Because of the depression. So
no, and as I said, part of wanting to go out with my mates and things was to deal with the depression, because, as I said, I drank so heavily because it was the only way that I could get some kind of relief from what I was feeling in my head, and it was just for those few hours, or for that evening, it was like a whole weight of pressure, because that's what alcohol does to you. It like loosens all your inhibitions, makes you feel more relaxed. Obviously it's a huge depressant as well, which doesn't help afterwards, but at the time it was just those few hours relief from the crushing pressure and horribleness in my head.
No, I mean, well, it was a really difficult time for us, and I think in some ways, I think if we hadn't had the truth, our marriage might not have survived through all of this. But I really believed that things would get better, and I knew who Dan was without the depression, and I knew that he could get back to that person again. And I believe that God must have put us in this marriage for a reason. And so I was determined kind of to keep things going, and just kept hoping that little by little things would get better. Even when kind of Dan was pushing me away, I was not going anywhere. So
no, it was pretty much Gina and God that kept our marriage together, and that was it.
Because I don't think there was one kind of major thing or one major turning point. It was all just little by little, until you started to feel a bit better, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So tell us how this affected your faith, and how you handled the your spirituality throughout this time. What happened?
I pretty much just drove myself as far as I could away from the truth. I would turn up occasionally on a Sunday, but to be honest, it meant nothing to me at that point. I wanted Gina to be happy, so I would go along. I mean, I was baptized at 18, and I think by about 28, I'd strayed about as far away from the truth as I possibly could. I don't think I had any faith at that point at all. Although I did believe in God, I didn't have any faith that he was working at all in my life. And the only reason that I know that I still believed in God is because I knew that what the things that I was trying to do to make myself feel something, the way that I was dealing with my depression and all this emotional numbness, I knew that it wasn't right and that I was not doing the right thing in God's eyes. And I didn't know how to reconcile that with the fact that I believed in God. And basically, I just tried to convince myself that it didn't matter at all to me and I didn't care.
Almost like a protective thing.
Yeah, it was. It was like a protective thing because it did matter and I did care and I desperately wanted to be part of it somewhere deep down, but I didn't feel like I could be. Sorry, did that make any sense at all?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
What about you, Gina? What kept your faith alive over that time?
Yeah, I mean, I had to go to the meeting on my own for a long time. As Dan said, he would come every now and again, but really only because I would keep nagging and saying, you know, please will you come with me today, or, you know, maybe you'll feel better if you come to the meeting. And so every now and again he would, but mostly I was going on my own, and that was really hard. And I didn't want to talk to people at the meeting about it. I felt quite embarrassed and I didn't really know where to start. I mean, even, this is what, 12, 13 years ago, even that long ago, people didn't really talk about depression very much. I think particularly maybe in the meeting, it wasn't something people talked about and I didn't really know where to start talking about it. So I just didn't. I just used to make excuses and say, oh, Dan's not very well, he's got a headache or he's tired, rather than talk about what was really going on. And so for a while, I ended up going to another meeting, not because our own meeting weren't supported, because they were, but just for me, I felt I needed to be somewhere where I wasn't always thinking, oh, I would have had Dan sat next to me, or, you know, all the memories of being there with Dan.
And part of it was that it was the meeting that I'd grown up at, so everyone wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, how I was doing, things like that. So Gina couldn't get away from it, whether she was at home or whether she went to the meeting, it was always there.
Yeah, so in some ways going somewhere else meant I could kind of just focus on that for a while and not think about all the other things. But then as you started to feel a little better and kind of want to go to the meeting a little bit more, we went back to our own meeting, because it's easier for you to go where you did know everybody and you knew everyone kind of knew you and could talk to you about it. But I think it did test my faith, because I did think, you know, this is such a difficult thing to deal with, and I'm not sure how to deal with it. I did think about, you know, kind of why has God put me in this particular marriage? So what is there a reason for this? Am I supposed to be able to help Dan through this? And I tried to think positively and think to the future and think maybe one day we'll meet another couple who are going through something similar, and perhaps we'll be able to share some of our experience with them. And actually that kind of kept me going, because I kept thinking there will be a point to this, there's a reason for this. And I needed that thought to keep me going, I think.
And who knows, now might be the time.
Yeah. Such a time as this.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to say was that I just realized that I've gone on about how far away I went from the truth without actually coming around to the point that I wanted to make about it, which was that I don't want people to think that I'm saying all this because I want people to feel sorry for me. The point is that I would hate for anyone to feel as isolated or as cut off from God as I did. I never want anyone to come so close as I did to giving up completely, because I thought I'd lost my chance to be in the kingdom. When I finally came round and realized that that was what I wanted, that I wanted to be in God's kingdom, I thought it was too late. I thought I'd just blown it and that was it. But the thing that we have to remember, I think, is that our Lord is like the Father in the parable of the lost son, and that he's always looking out for us, looking for us to make that first move, to turn back to him. And I think it's so encouraging. I always used to, like when older brethren, when I was younger, used to say, oh, that passage of scripture moves me to tears. I always used to think, oh, you're over dramatizing, come on, grip. But actually now when I read that, it really does bring tears to my eyes, the parable of the lost son. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So what were the turning points?
Oh, yeah, you said there was no big turning point, but were there were little steps along the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think little things that built your confidence really helped along the way.
Yeah.
So things like when Dan learned to drive, that made a difference because it gave him a bit more confidence in himself. He felt he'd achieved something. So I think little steps like that definitely helped, didn't they?
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the fact that even though I was still really ill, my benefits were stopped because I'd been claiming medical benefits, and we couldn't really understand why. We had lots of phone calls with I can't even remember who it was, is it?
The benefits office.
Yeah, the benefits office. We couldn't understand why, because I was still so clearly really ill. But now we can look back on that and see that that was the Lord nudging me, because he knew that I was ready to start something else, even though I didn't know. And it was because of that I had to find a way to get back into work. And so it wasn't long after that I started volunteering, and from there it just slowly progressed.
And I mean, the other big thing was finding the right counsellor, but that kind of comes into when we talk about some other things. But I think that was another turning point.
Yep. Okay. And just going back just one step. Just when you went to the meetings and you saw people that you knew and people who loved you, how did that make you feel? Did that improve your feeling of health, or did that sort of like, or were you again like that, I want to hug but I don't want to hug?
It made me feel resentful, to be honest. When I went to the meeting, it made me feel resentful because everyone else was happy and I wanted to be happy, and I wasn't. I was just so unbelievably miserable. So I pretty much just tried to get out as soon as I could.
Okay.
And I think for me, it was almost a case of don't be too nice to me because then I'll cry. So I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to kind of just keep that, no, everything's fine, because actually if I had started talking about it and actually really opened up to people, I would have just got upset about it. So I almost, probably people wanted to do more and I almost wouldn't let them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now that you're better, or a lot better, what is it that keeps you going now that you didn't have before? Is there any big change that's like really makes a big difference day by day?
To me personally, the fact that we now have a much stronger marriage keeps me going. We're so much closer than we ever were before. In fact, yeah, we just are, and we just feel like we've been through so much together that there's nothing really that we can't talk about now or that we can't get through together.
Yeah, and I think we've seen each other at our lowest and at our worst, and therefore there's nothing that we can't open up to each other about now. And we know how to support each other better with things as well. I think our faith is a big thing as well, because when we were first married, our faith wasn't really our priority. Yes, we did go to the meeting, but we didn't really talk about the truth that much at home. We weren't particularly good at doing our readings. I think that's a really big change for us, is that that's become so much more important for us and we can depend on that so much more. and that helps us definitely.
Cool.
And then I think for you, the other thing that always brightens you is the children.
Sure.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's partly it's because that unless I'm having a really, really terrible bout of depression when I can't get up, I know that I have responsibilities and I know that I have to get up and do things. The kids aren't just going to look after themselves. Well, maybe they would if I just let them. But
you never know how, do you, with children?
I probably should try. But yeah, I know that I've got things to do and I have to be responsible. I have to look after the kids, and they're funny. They make me laugh, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
That's really awesome. We really appreciate you sharing your story and just being vulnerable enough to be able to share this, which was obviously a really, really difficult, very raw time in your lives. And we just really, really appreciate that you're willing to share this, and because there are so many people that are struggling in similar ways and often feeling really, really, as you've described, isolated and alone. So yeah, thank you so much.
And I know also it's really hard to talk about it too when it's so recent. You know, it's well, I know what it's like for me when you're talking about something that's happened relatively recently. It's sort of like I don't want to cry, you know, but you know, we really appreciate that. And if it's okay with you, can we have you along next time, and we'll carry on this discussion and see what you've got to say about what we can do for people who are in your situation.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Now, if you want to see any more on about Family Matters, you can click on our Ecclesia website, and I'll put that link up shortly. Hello everyone, welcome to Family Matters. Today we have Dan and Gina Woodcock on with us, and we're going to be talking about depression, and this is part 2 of a 2-part conversation. So if you missed the last part for last week, do have a look at that. It was a really encouraging discussion, a really powerful one where Dan and Gina were able to really share their feelings and share how that they've been through this horrible dark place together and how their marriage stayed together at the same time. So we're going to carry on with that discussion today. We're going to look at a slightly different aspect of it this time, looking at what it was that brings people through depression and how we can help. So this is going to be a really neat discussion, and we're really looking forward to it. So thanks for joining us, Dan and Gina.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You too. I just wanted to read from Psalm 43, which I haven't turned up yet. verses 2, 3, and 5. You are my God. You, God, are my stronghold. Why have you rejected me? Why must I go about mourning, oppressed by the enemy? Send forth your light and your truth. Let them guide me. Let them bring me to your holy mountain, to the place where you dwell. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God, my joy and my delight. I will praise you with the harp. O God, my God, why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Saviour and my God. So with that introduction, I think that was a psalm where the psalmist was feeling particularly low, or those couple of psalms. why are you so distressed, O my soul, he says. And he says, put your hope in God. So what we're going to find out today is how you guys got through it, through this depression that we heard about last time. So, yeah, how can we begin that?
Yeah, well, we're going to talk today about what sort of treatments are available and what you did, Dan. What was helpful for you in your journey.
So, yeah, what sort of treatments are available for a start?
In the way of treatments, the first thing you need to do is go and see a doctor, basically. And it's not always that easy, though, because sometimes you will come across a doctor, you'll meet them straight away and think, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say it, you're not very good at your job. Or you're not very good at this part of your job. And so you need to be persistent with it and go find the doctor that's right for you, because I've had some terrible ones, I really have, that just don't listen to you. All they want to do is just up your medication, stick you straight on medication or whatever it is. It might not necessarily be right at the time.
So yeah, so don't be afraid if you go to the doctor and you don't get the answers that you think you need. Don't be afraid to maybe book an appointment with someone else. I think the other thing is maybe to take someone with you to the appointment, because I mean I've been to a few appointments with Dan, partly because when he's really depressed he finds it quite hard to concentrate. So actually, if I'm there, I can remember all the things the doctor's asked him to think about or to do. But the other thing is that when you're in that really deep depression, that's all you can remember. You can't remember anything else. So I can also give the balance of kind of how he feels when he's feeling better, or maybe a more balanced view of how he's getting on with things. So I think it's if you can take someone with you, it is really helpful. Well, is it helpful?
Yeah, yeah, it is very helpful. No, it is very helpful. I always try and take Gina along with me when I can.
Yeah.
Basically, as she said, I can't remember anything. I can't, when I'm feeling that depressed, all I can be is in that moment when I feel so terrible. I can't remember how I felt, because sometimes they'll ask you, well, how long have you felt like this? Did you feel like this yesterday? And I'm like, I feel like it now. That's pretty much all I can remember. But fortunately, Gina has those answers, so it's okay.
Yeah.
The next step will probably be medication. If the GP will usually tell you to like exercise more, eat healthily, basically be healthy, and you'll feel better. But if that doesn't work, then it's usually medication. And I know I had a few concerns when I went on antidepressants for the first time. Or maybe not for the first time, I didn't really care the first time, but I have had concerns about it. Like, it makes you think, well, if my moods change this drastically, am I still really me? Is this still the person that I am, or am I someone different now? And will Gina still love me if I'm someone different? Or maybe God wants me to feel like this, so who am I to change it? And it was something that I struggled with for a while, but it was actually writing those articles for the Christadelphian that made me actually find the answers rather than just ignoring the questions. Am I still me? Yeah, of course. The antidepressants won't change what you like, what you don't like, what kind of person you are, whether you're a happy person naturally, whether you're a cynical person, whatever it is, that they won't change that about you. All they'll do is mess with the balances of some of the chemicals in your brain and make you feel a bit happier. And as for maybe God wants me to feel like this, well, that would be the same as, say, falling off a ladder, breaking your back, and just lying there and being like, maybe God wants me to feel like this, so I shouldn't go to hospital. I should just lie here. And it just doesn't make any sense. And I was worried about being on medication for the rest of my life as well, because I think that's probably what it's going to come to. But again, if you compare it to something like diabetes, you don't just stop taking your insulin because you feel a bit better. You have to be taking it, otherwise bad things will happen. And it's exactly the same. Then you have things like talking therapies. Again, you really have to find the right person for you, and it can take a bit of shopping around. I remember I went to one counsellor who was absolutely convinced that I was more severely depressed than I actually was because I had a beard. And I think it was kind of coming from like the personal grooming angle. You're not looking after yourself, therefore you must be really depressed.
Little did he know that was just your style.
Yeah. I didn't go back to him again.
I don't think he got.
No, we didn't go back there again. But on the other hand, I've spoken to a really good counsellor who I still contact every now and then, and that was through the CSN, the Christadelphian Support Network, which was actually my very last resort. I didn't really did not want to go to a Christadelphian counsellor and talk about all the things that were troubling me and all the things that had gone on in my life and all the things that I felt so horrible about and all the depression and everything. I did not want to go to a Christadelphian and talk about that, because my attitude was, but you're all so good and I'm so obviously a failure. Why would I expose myself to that?
But you kind of got to the point where you didn't know what else to try.
Yeah, I got to rock bottom really, and it was kind of, I really felt like I had a choice of, God had put me there at this fork in the road, and it was like, you can carry on going your own way and see where that takes you, or you can lean on me. And thankfully that is what I did, and eventually I did ring the CSN, and they were absolutely brilliant. I really cannot speak highly enough of them. I got through on one day, talked to one of their call handler, that's the one, and then I explained to him how I felt and what was going on, and like as soon as I'd finished, he was like, yeah, I think I know the exact right guy for you. The next day or the day after that, I got a call from this counsellor, and he's just been so unbelievably helpful. I'm so grateful to the Lord for him.
And I think actually talking to someone in the truth really helped, because they understood kind of some of the worries linked to that as well, and like the link to how you worried about your faith as well, rather than just about the symptoms of the depression.
Yeah, but I think also the timing of that was so important, because it was only because I wanted to come back to the truth that worked for me. If I'd have gone to see him 10 years ago, it would have done nothing for me, no more than anyone else. But it was because I'd made that first move in my head and decided to lean on God that he really helped.
So those fears that you had of explaining, your feelings to someone you sort of almost knew, none of that materialized?
No, it was absolutely brilliant. He just knew exactly where I was coming from, because what I failed to see was that, yes, I found Christadelphians intimidating, but actually, like morally intimidating, I mean, but actually we're just humans, we're just people, we are all people, we all suffer with the same things, broadly speaking. Because I'd spoken to the call handler and he found the right person, he knew exactly where I was coming from, and knew exactly what I was talking about, and was able to help me much more than anyone that I'd seen in the world, because he understood it from a Christadelphian or spiritual point of view.
Yeah.
So how did you get to the point in your mind where you were willing to make this step? What helped you get to that point where you were prepared to say I've had enough of being in this place?
It wasn't so much I've had enough of being in this place, it was that there was nothing else left to try. That was it. It wasn't by choice that well, obviously it was a choice, but it wasn't that I thought, oh yes, this is what I'll do now. It was absolute desperation of, there is just nothing else that I can do. All I can do is lean on God, and then ringing the CSN suddenly occurred to me, like, that would be a good idea.
Okay. So what can we all learn from depression? Like, you know, as a group, you know, if someone like you came into our meeting and suffering from depression, or weren't at the meeting suffering from depression, what's the best ways for us to respond? Or is there anything like, you know, any procedures our ABs could put into place to say, you know, these are good things for us to do?
Or things not to do.
Or things not to do. Probably better.
Yeah. I think in terms of procedures, it's just kind of like keeping in touch, offering to go and do the readings with the person, or offering a lift to the meeting if they're feeling really, because there were points that I felt so just awful that I couldn't drive. As I said earlier about my concentration, I couldn't drive. I couldn't have been trusted to get on public transport at all, because I don't know what I would have done. I would have been all over the place. But
so if someone felt like that, then offering a lift would really help. I think it's the other side of that though is to know that you might offer something several times before they accept. So not to take it as, if they say no, not to take it as no, I never want you to help me. No, I'm not in the right place right now. But actually not to kind of to give up on them, but to remember that you can ask again, because they probably do want your help.
And I think that's one of the things. Sometimes I think that there were tiny threads that tied me back to the meeting, and that is one of them, that brethren and sisters from our meeting would ring and say, hi, how are you? Or they'd pop in every now and then. And it's, at the time I was just like, oh, leave me alone. But now I can look back and see they cared about me. And it was just like another tiny thread just to tie me back to the truth.
And I appreciated it, even at the time you didn't really know what to make of it. I really appreciated when people checked in with us or asked how we were doing, and also kind of offering help, maybe to come and sit with the person who's suffering from depression, so that the partner can go out to just go and get something done, or go and have a bit of time for themselves, because there's quite a lot of the time I didn't like to leave Dan on his own. And that would be really helpful, because then I could actually go and have a bit of space, a bit of time for myself as well.
Yeah, and I think praying for the person is a huge thing. You want to pray for things like comfort for them, that they get the support that they need, that they'll hold on to their faith even though things are looking pretty terrible for them at the moment.
And tell them that you're praying for them.
Yeah,
because that's really important, knowing that people are praying for you.
Is it helpful to have people pray with you at the time, or is that just too confronting?
It depends on your state of mind. It will all depend on the person. For me, I had no interest in the truth, so it wouldn't have helped me, but I can relate it to other things. I think that if I had wanted to pray, it would have been really helpful, because I didn't have any concentration. I couldn't really string words together properly. So having someone pray for me would have been great.
Yeah.
I think within the ecclesia as well, you're saying about kind of the things to say or not to say. You know, sometimes people do fall into the trap of saying things like, well, what have you got to be sad about? Or, you know, pull yourself together, or where's your faith? And those aren't helpful things if they're said, are they?
No, because they make you feel more guilty. They just perpetuate the whole thing.
And people say them with good intentions.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you know, they're trying to help.
Yeah, and I think there is a certain generation that consider that a really good way to help, just like give you a good kick up the backside, you'll be all right. But actually, if you're suffering with depression, then it just makes you feel guilty for how you're feeling, because you start to think, well, why am I sad? What's wrong with me? What on earth have I got to be sad about? And then you feel bad about that. But I think also sincerity is a huge thing. And I wouldn't ever use it as a criticism of anyone, but a lot of conversation I find at the meeting is, hi, how are you? And that's it. And then you move on to the next person. And as I say, we all do it. So it's not a criticism of anyone, but I do remember the impact that it had on me. There was one brother in particular who, when I went to the meeting, would talk to me, would ask me how I was, what was going on in my life. We'd have a conversation, and then the most important bit was that next time I went, he would remember it all, and he would ask me how this was progressing and how something else was going on, and it just made me feel like I was wanted there, and that I was cared about. And that was such a huge thing to me, and that was another one of those little threads that just tied me back.
But actually, if everybody had tried to do that, it would have been too much, wouldn't
it?
So
Definitely.
I think it is about, you know, if there's someone who particularly you get on with or is particularly good at talking to people, then that, you know, that's a really good idea. But I think if everyone had tried to do that, it would have been quite overwhelming. So
we'd
never got home.
No, we would never have got home. Exactly.
If one person adopts you, or one or two people adopt you, that would be really great. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well is being open and talking. So I mean, I was saying that I found it quite hard to talk to people at the meeting. Once I did start to open up and talk to people, you do find out how many people actually have either been through it or know someone who's been through it, and people are really understanding. But it is starting that conversation, whichever side that comes from. I think, you know, trying to be more open and trying to talk about it more is also really helpful.
The other thing is that you don't always have to offer a solution. You can just listen, and sometimes that's enough.
I always found that really hard, because I'm the kind of person that if there's a problem, I want to know what's the problem, this is how we fix it, and now we move on. And depression just isn't like that at all. You know, I've learned that I can't just try and offer solutions, because actually there often aren't solutions. That what Dan needs from me is just to listen and to be here and to know that I will listen.
Also, if you're offering help to people, there's quite a strong chance that they might say no time after time after time after time. It's really important that you don't be offended by that, because it's not you that they're rejecting. They're not saying, no, I don't want to spend time with you. What they're saying is, no, I don't feel up to doing that at the moment. So as Gina said, if they say no, don't take that as never ask me again.
Yeah, and don't take it personally.
No.
Yeah.
So how is it if people know that you are suffering from depression or some, you know, illness in that particular way, if they, you know, keep asking about that particular thing? Is that too much? Do you want just normal sort of conversation, everyday conversation, or is it appreciated to be asked on a regular basis how you're doing in the depression?
That's a really tricky one, because I think it depends whereabouts you are with your mood, because I think in sometimes the way he's feeling, you really appreciate talking about that, and other times you just don't want to talk about it, and that's a really hard one to know how to judge, actually.
I completely agree. I was trying to think of a good way to put it, but you did it well.
And is that a way, is that something that is, you know, say Sharon or I are talking to someone at the meeting, you put a little thing in the conversation and see if someone picks it up, perhaps?
Yeah,
you know, absolutely.
And if they don't, just carry on, you know, how's the weather? Yes, is it morning yet?
No, I think that's a really good point, because that way you're still having the conversation with them, but you're kind of giving them the option whether they want to open up about things at that moment or not. You're kind of letting them know, I'm here to talk about it, but it's fine if you don't want to as well. So
yes, because it can be very awkward being on the other side of the fence, knowing is this something I should bring up? You know, I know, but should I bring it up, or do you actually really just want to talk about the weather today? And that's it.
I don't think I would. I personally wouldn't ever have been offended if anyone had brought it up. You know, but if I didn't want to talk about it, I would just kind of shut down that avenue of conversation.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't at all be offended. I probably just would have been happy to know someone cared enough to know, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
It's cool.
It's really useful to know that, because it can be so difficult to know.
I wouldn't quote me on that though, because some people might be offended.
Okay. Fair enough.
If someone does get offended, don't go back and say, but Dan said it would be okay.
And there might be some people whose emotions just can't cope with talking about something like that at the same time. You know, so if that conversation shuts down, shut it down.
Yeah.
Just talk about the cat. Does a sense of humor help?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely that's something that if you know you're kind of having a bad day or you're starting to feel a bit low, we definitely try and find things to make us laugh, don't we?
I mean, if it's a really bad bout, then just having a bit of a laugh isn't going to help. But if I can start to feel it coming on, there are times that we can cut it off just by laughing.
Yeah, and our daughters are very good at giving us things to laugh about. Our favourite at the moment is that our older daughter likes us to sing "The Day Thou Gavest" to her at bedtime. And is it the last verse?
Yeah, it's the last verse where it says, "Earth's proud empires pass away," and she always sings it as "Earth's proud vampires." Absolutely hilarious.
So if Dan's having a bad day, we just have to say "Earth's proud vampires" and we feel better.
That's cool.
I mean, other things kind of to try and help yourself. I mean, you've got certain things that you try to do if you know you're starting to feel bad. So you said about having a mantra.
Oh yeah, that is something that I can do, but that is only if I have a day when I can't get out of bed and I can't think and I can't do anything. Then I do tend to just lie there and just repeat the same thing over and over again. And it's just I'm breaking, Lord help me. I'm breaking, Lord help me, which is basically the only short sentence that I can string together in like a coherent way. But there are things that you can do when it's a bit milder. Just if you can feel it coming on, which I never used to be able to. I've only learned to do that since I don't know when, to be honest, the last year. But it's such an odd feeling. It feels like a bubble growing in your chest, and when it bursts, that's going to be the depression. I can sort of deflate that sometimes by going out for a run or a walk or doing something energetic. You know, the things that the doctor would tell you to do if it was just a mild or minor depression.
And also trying to do something that distracts you.
Yeah.
But it's got to be something, you're saying, got to be something that's really absorbing, not just kind of putting the telly on, because then you've still got all your thoughts.
Yeah, or the same, reading a book, you can still have your thoughts going on in the background while still staring at the page, basically. So I used to play computer games. If I started feeling like I was really going downhill, I would throw my mind into a computer game, because you actually have to concentrate on what you're doing. or if you play an instrument or something like that, but obviously not one that you're too good at, not one that you can play from memory and still think about in the background. It has to be something that you can really focus on and really takes up your attention.
Yeah, that really takes your whole brain.
Yeah.
So when you, like you say, you know, you when you're going through a mental illness or a depression, your mind can't take in too much. And you're talking about praying before, you know, you're repeating the one thing over and over because that's pretty much all you can do. How does that go? Like, if you're wanting to, if you have a depression or a mental illness of whatever sort, how do you go about praying or doing Bible study? And can you do anything like that? How do you keep your faith alive? How can you keep your faith alive like that?
All I think you can do is, as much as you can do, as stupid as that sounds, but if you can't, if you're really bad, then just find a sentence in the Bible that you can relate to. If something that you've heard, something that you've read recently, anything that you can latch onto that you can relate to, because and the same with praying. God knows what's in your heart. He knows how much you're capable of, and he knows if you really cannot do any more than that. It's like the widow's mite. She wasn't condemned for putting in a tiny amount because that's all that she had. I think it's exactly the same. You won't be condemned for giving just a tiny prayer or having just a tiny portion of scripture in your head, because if that's all you're capable of handling, that's all you're capable of handling. It's the same with the parable of the talents. The last guy who comes and he says, why didn't you at least put my money in the bank so I could collect the interest? And that's what this is. This is the very least that you can do. In your case, or in my case, it's the very most that I could do, but compared to what I could see everybody else doing, it was a tiny amount. But God knows, he knows what your thought process is, and he knows if you're just saying, well, I can get away with just doing like reading one verse, or whether actually that one verse is all that you can manage.
Yeah. How can we pray for people who are going through depression or mental illness? What would you say would be the best sort of, you know, how can we pray? What do we say?
So I think praying for them to be comforted and to be encouraged, praying that they've got the right people to support them around them, that, you know, they can get the right help, and also that they can hold on to their faith, they can hold on to their belief throughout that, even though that's really difficult. Even if, you know, as Dan said, they can only hold on to a small amount at that time, that they don't lose it entirely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what advice would you give for somebody who's living with a person who has got depression? How can they best support?
You're gonna take that on me?
Well, how did you find Gina best supported you, Dan?
Patience, really. That she never gave up on me, which at the time sometimes I wished she would, but she never did. And now I can look back on that and think that is the best possible thing that she could have done for me. She never gave up on me. She appreciated the fact that it was taking a long time. Once she could see the turnaround starting, she didn't expect me just to go like that and be fine. She could appreciate the small steps, and she always listened to me. She always listened to when I wanted to talk and didn't push me when I didn't want to talk. And those are all really, really big things.
And I mean, I think from my side, the first thing for the other person is try not to blame yourself, because I did think it was my fault for a long time, and actually, you know, depression is an illness. It's not anyone's fault, so don't blame yourself, because you'll just make yourself feel worse as well. I think try to talk to someone about it. Again, that's something I didn't do in the beginning, but I felt so much better when I did talk to someone. And if there's certain things you don't want to talk to people about, because sometimes things felt so bad that actually I didn't want to open up about those things, maybe find another way. So I wrote a diary some of the time, because it was just another way of kind of a release for the frustration that I felt without having to talk to someone about it. Also, try not to take it out on the other person, even though they may be, you know, it may be really frustrating that you've been out at work all day and you've come home and they're still in bed and they haven't done anything at home. And, you know, sometimes it felt really hard, and I could quite easily have just gone in and told him how I felt, but it wouldn't have helped because he already felt terrible. So if I'd reinforced that, all I would have done was make it worse. So I think, as hard as that is sometimes, it's really important to try not to. Be patient, don't expect too much too soon. And I think, you know, acknowledging those little steps in the right direction. So even if it is just, oh, when I got home from work that day, he had got up and had some breakfast or something, you know, he'd got up and opened the curtains. Even those little tiny things, I tried to acknowledge those so that he knew that I was really proud of the steps that he'd made. And finally helping them get the treatment and the support they need. So it's not, you don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
So what does life look like for yourselves now?
Pretty good, I think.
Very, very different. Very different to how it was.
Yeah, much better than it was. I mean, we've just, the whole thing has taught and is still teaching us so much. We're so much stronger as a married couple than we were.
And I think stronger than we would have been without it. Yeah,
definitely. Stronger than we would have been had we not been through all this, because we would still be in that kind of lukewarm about the truth, so kind of caught in the middle, not really going for it, or not really backing away completely either. But as it is, our faith is so much stronger, and we feel like now that the Lord has brought us the long way round back to him, we've been taught to really long for the kingdom rather than it just be something that's included in our prayers, because we know that that's a time when both of us will have peace. And also it's taught us that God has a purpose for us, not just as, yeah, I've got a purpose for you, you and you in that ecclesia, and the rest of you may as well just come along as well. But he's actually got an individual purpose for us. And I think that's the biggest thing that's come out of it for me, is that God has gone through this much trouble to bring me back, that he must have something that is a real purpose for me. And I'm sure you feel the same after all the things that you've been through as well.
I know, and sometimes it's hard when we look back, but actually I wouldn't change any of it, because we wouldn't be exactly where we are unless we'd been through all of that. And you know, I'm glad we are where we are now. I think we've you know, come through all of that, and it does make us think that we could deal with, you know, whatever the future holds, really.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So what little words of hope and encouragement would you give to people who are just in the place where you were, and to, you know, just inspire some hope that things can look better for the future?
I think that there is always hope, that however bad things feel, however bad they get, that there is always hope that things can get better.
Yeah, definitely. That I would never have believed, say, even 3 years ago, that we would be here doing something like this, talking to you, or that I would be speaking at the meeting or even presiding. I would never have believed it. I would have thought that was something impossible that would never have happened. because I would never have the confidence to do that. But there is always hope, and if I can change that much, then the Lord can change anyone, basically.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences and for the wisdom that you provided for the rest of us.
I don't think anyone's ever said that I provided wisdom before.
That you've shared then. It's been really amazing talking to you both this session and the last one. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sure that you will have really encouraged someone or help someone to be able to encourage or help someone else who's in the same boat.
Can I just say one more thing?
You sure can.
The other thing, the other little bit of hope that I really hope will encourage people is that they're not alone. You're never alone. The Lord is always there, even if you can't see him and you can't feel him. He's always there. And you're not only, it's not only him, your brethren and sisters really do care about you, even if you feel like you don't, even if you feel like they don't, they really do. So that's the big thing that I would like people to take out of us sharing this, that they're not alone. They're not the only ones that feel like that.
Yeah, and that's so important, because loneliness is a killer, really.
It is.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We're going to wrap up in a moment. Over the next 2 weeks, we have Good Foundations for the Early Years of Marriage with Ben and Ali Wisnop coming up. And we have What to Do When You Really Mess Up with Doug and Cindy Mogg. So some really exciting ones coming up, and they'll be on New Zealand time, 7:30 p.m. on Monday the 15th and the 22nd of June.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found the episode helpful. Don't forget, most of these episodes are also available as videos on our video channel, cdvideo.org. So head over and take a look. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions, please get in touch or leave us a voice message. We love to hear your feedback. You can email us at btf@cdvideo.org. If you enjoyed the episode, then please share it with others. Until next time, may God bless you in your studies and your walk towards God's kingdom. Amen.